It's the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by 90 Min, and we are live.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to another live edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by 90 Min. I have no idea why my camera is freezing for those of you watching us via YouTube, but I do apologize. Hopefully it will rectify itself as the stream goes on. Big hello to everybody listening to us via the audio platforms as well. Hope you guys are all good. And basically, welcome to the show. I'm going to ask you guys, if you haven't done so already, to subscribe to the channel so we can get that out of the way. You won't hear me say it again. You might hear me say a couple of times, though, during the podcast, that if you are watching us via YouTube, to hit that like button, because it really, really does help. We're going to be discussing a number of different things throughout this edition of the podcast. We're going to be talking about Hector Bellerin. Arsenal have set an asking price for the Spanish fullback. We're going to be talking a little bit more about Granit Xhaka's, what we believe to be, imminent departure. We're also going to be talking a little bit about Arsenal's wider situation in terms of what we can and can't do during this transfer window. And of course, as always, we're going to round off the show by taking some of you guys' questions. Let's start then with Hector Bellerin. So we've heard and we've been reading and we've been told and we understand that Arsenal have set a price tag for Hector Bellerin. The club have said to have set a asking price of £20 million for Hector Bellerin. And what I want to do is I want to ask you guys to just cast your minds back to a podcast I think we probably did maybe a week and a half ago now, where we were talking about how much we could realistically expect Arsenal to bring in from player sales this summer. And I remember, like, a lot of people in the comments were saying to me, you've massively underestimated this. You've massively undervalued a load of our players. But as you know, as things are starting to take shape, as you know, the transfer window nears its official opening, etc., what I think we're probably going to realize is actually those valuations were pretty much spot on, because people do not have money right now. And we talk a lot about the impact of the COVID pandemic on Arsenal as a football club. We've talked a lot about the impact it's had on the Premier League and the impact that it might have on the wider market. But outside of the Premier League, where there is a bigger reliance, I would say, on crowds, on merchandise, on, making money during the games, it's even worse. No team in Italy, for example, has the huge TV revenue that the Premier League brings. Yeah, they do all right for themselves as well, but it's nowhere near on the same scale as what the Premier League clubs do. And if you look at the players that Arsenal are trying to move out, the majority of them, I would say, are more likely to join clubs overseas. And therefore, Arsenal are going to struggle to get top dollar for some of these players. Hector Bellerin is someone that, we've looked at over the course of the last few months. I think it's been pretty clear and pretty apparent that he is heading towards, an Arsenal exit. And we heard that last summer he was heavily linked with a move for PSG. And I've already sort of let you guys know my thoughts on that. And the fact that actually with PSG supposedly now turning their attentions to Achraf Hakimi at Inter, they've been alerted to the fact that Inter need to raise funds. And they've looked at Hakimi as someone that they could cash in on, and PSG obviously have the money to do it. You feel like that's the way PSG are going to lean. You feel as though they're going to lean towards Achraf Hakimi. Yes, he'll be more expensive than Hector Bellerin, but he's a player with a much higher ceiling, I think. And he's a player who is worth a lot more than Hector Bellerin. So they'll look at that, and they've got the money to do it, and we'll feel, why not? That's probably the best move. And where does that leave us with Hector Bellerin? Where there are very few clubs, I believe, right now that would be willing to pay in excess of £20 million for Hector Bellerin. The club he's being most heavily linked with is, of course, Atletico Madrid now. Atletico Madrid are said to be looking to replace Kieran Trippier, who could be on his way back to the Premier League this summer. And Hector Bellerin is somebody that they've identified. He's somebody that their sporting director has actually been a big fan of for a number of years. He's spoken repeatedly about the fact that he likes Hector Bellerin. He likes the fact that he can get forward quite effectively and enjoys the fact that he's a bit of an all-rounder in terms of the fullback. He's not just the modern-day fullback in terms of only able to get forward. I don't really know what this guy's been watching, but according to him, Hector Bellerin is the all-round fullback. So he's clearly interested. And the only real other interest we've heard with regards to Hector Bellerin has also come from Spain, and that's in the shape of Real Betis, a club that Hector Bellerin does have ties with. His father was a huge Real Betis supporter, and he has been quoted as saying in the past that he would like to play for Real Betis someday. But Real Betis don't have the money. Real Betis cannot pay £20 million, which is what Arsenal are said to be asking for Hector Bellerin. So that deal feels a little bit unlikely now. Hector Bellerin has kind of made it clear that he has made it clear to the club. He's not done it publicly, but he has made it clear to the club that he wants out. And, that's okay. I think as a fan base, the majority of us have accepted that it probably is time for Hector Bellerin to move on. And so we'll wish him the best and we look to move on from him. But Real Betis, who are a club that Bellerin, I believe, would be interested in joining, have only talked about a loan deal, maybe with an obligation to buy at the end of that. And that's just not going to cut it for Arsenal because, as we'll come on to talk about in a little bit, Arsenal are in desperate need of player sales this summer. That's the only way we're going to get any of the business that we want done. So Bellerin linked with Atletico, linked with Real Betis. Atletico seems the more likely destination, having just won La Liga, and with the possibility of them cashing in on Kieran Trippier, they would more likely have the funds to persuade Arsenal that he should, to persuade Arsenal to sell, to persuade Arsenal to let him go. But it's not looking great, because that interest from Atletico Madrid is contingent on Atletico Madrid selling Kieran Trippier. So in order for that deal to go through, you need Kieran Trippier to find the club. You need a club to cough up what Atletico want for Kieran Trippier. You then need Kieran Trippier to agree terms with that club. And then you need Atletico to come and put that money down on Hector Bellerin and try and take him over there. So it's really, it's not a given that Hector Bellerin will join Atletico Madrid. They're interested. Arsenal have made their price clear, but we're going to have to wait and see how this one is going to go, because I'm not 100% sure that this is actually going to materialize. And if it doesn't, Arsenal are going to be stuck with Hector Bellerin, because we're not going to be able to shift him on for good money to just anyone and everyone. Sanjay says, Harry, you do realize Betis just sold their right back Emerson for 50 million. They have money, bro. They haven't sold him for 50 million, Sanjay. Where on earth have you got that from? Emerson was part owned by Barcelona already. Emerson has gone to Barcelona for the £8 million fee that Barcelona had written in their contracts for them to take him off of Real Betis on a full agreement. So when the player came to Spain, he was part owned by Barcelona, part owned by Real Betis, and Barcelona had the option to sign him for a fee that was already written into the contract. And according to all the outlets at the moment, £8.1 million is what Barcelona have paid for Emerson to join them fully and to leave Real Betis. So that's not true. They haven't raised 50 million, and I don't even think they're going to. I think that some of you are saying in the chat, and I don't know this, but I think Real Betis might have already identified a replacement right back. So that's why I don't think the Real Betis talk is serious. It never has been serious. They toyed with the idea, they thought about it, they considered it, but they were only ever willing to take Hector Bellerin on loan, which was just not going to cut it. And so Hector Bellerin is not Betis bound. Atletico Madrid are our only hope at the moment, in my opinion. But again, I go back to that point. I talked a lot about, people kind of overestimating what clubs would pay for our players and getting themselves into this kind of false sense of security with regards to this transfer window, where they've gone, well, we're going to sell Xhaka for 30 million. We're going to sell Lacazette for 30 million. We're going to sell Bellerin for 25 million. We're going to sell Willock for 20 million. We're going to sell Guendouzi for 15, Torreira for 10. None of that is going to come to fruition. And the problem here is that unless KSE are actually willing to invest money and say, here you go, we have to put this money in, we have to put this money down to get us back to where we're going to be, we're going to really struggle in this window. We talked about it yesterday. Why couldn't Arsenal get a deal for Emi Buendia done? Partly because obviously they don't rate him enough to break the bank and sign him. But, the offer that we made to Aston Villa was made up of structured payments. And Aston Villa had the finance to go and say, you know what? Screw Arsenal's structured payments. We're going to table, I think they tabled £30 million of it up front. And their fee could potentially rise up to 40 million from what we read yesterday, based on add-ons, based on, bits and pieces in the contract. But yeah, it's, it's worrying because I know I've been saying don't panic, and I'm not panicking because there's still a long time to go in the window. But you're starting to look at this and you're starting to, we've heard it throughout the last few weeks. Arsenal going to sign Bissouma, £30 million, Sander Berge, £30 million. The fact that we are in a position where we haven't been able to sell players yet, the fact that we're in a position where we're having to make deals or try and make deals that are involved with that consist of structured payments suggests that actually we do need to bloody sell, contrary to what the club have been telling us. And people are getting frustrated, rightly so. I'm still kind of in the headspace where I'm not going to lose my mind about it just yet, because there is a long way to go. But the club are skint. The club itself as an entity is bloody skint. And unless KSE put money in and say, yes, we're going to do this or we're going to do that, like they keep promising they're going to do, then nothing's going to change. Not only have Arsenal just gone through an entire season without fans in the stadium during a global pandemic, we've had to pay off Mesut Ozil, we've had to pay off Shkodran Mustafi, all players that were on Champions League level wages, right? That we've had to pay those guys off just to get them off the books. We haven't had that revenue coming in from the fans. Inevitably, the revenue that comes from merchandise and stuff bought in the stadium dips as well. And now we're going into our first season in 26 without European football. Financially, this football club, and when I say this football club, I don't mean KSE. I mean the football club as a sole entity is on its fucking knees. And unless the owners are going to show some love to the football club by putting their hands in their very wealthy pockets and saying, we recognize that we've run this asset down into the ground. We recognize that for Arsenal to be competing at the top of English football again, or even close to, we're not asking for a title win straight away. We're asking just to get back in the Champions League. We're asking for Arsenal to be in the top 4 clubs in the UK. But in order to get to that point, there needs to be investment. And, people always bang on about Leicester City and they bang on about, some other clubs, and they say, that the recruitment has been excellent. Yeah, the recruitment has been good. Our recruitment's been bloody shocking. But after years of it being shocking, the only way you catch up quickly is to go and pump money in and to go out and buy top class proven players. And that's how you catch up. That's how you close the gap. It's the only way right now for Arsenal. I'd like to see us make some signings, as I said, where, we're taking low risks that have the potential to bring high rewards. I talk about that a lot. And I think you do need some of that, and you need some of that to balance the books, of course, and to be able to create assets that you can then sell in times of need, etc., etc. But judging by what we've seen so far, firstly with the Buendia saga, and now what we're hearing and reading and what we're understanding about the inability of our club to get decent transfer fees in for players that we're trying to move on. It feels like the only way we're gonna do that and we're going to achieve that is if the owners put their hands in their pockets. And there's no evidence, given all their history with the football club, that they're going to do that this summer. And that's the big concern. It's the big worry. You're hearing about Granit Xhaka now potentially going, to Roma. And I'm not going to sit here and make a massive defense about Granit Xhaka again, because every time I do, the comments just fill up with people calling me this, that, and the other. But if you're going to sell Granit Xhaka, how much is it going to cost to replace him? If you're talking about Ruben Neves replacing him, you're talking about someone in excess of £30 million. So how the hell can you afford to sell the Swiss captain for £12.9 million? That was Roma's latest offer, 15 million euros, £12.9 million. You're just creating a deficit that you can't deal with. You're creating a deficit that you can't cope with. You sell someone for 12, 13 million pounds, and then you need 30 million pounds to replace him. There's a 17 million pound deficit there. Where's that money going to come from? Where on earth is that money going to come from? You tell me. I don't know. It's not going to come from Stan Kroenke's pocket, that's for sure. Let's go over to the live chat box. Get your questions in, get your thoughts in. Just to summarize the kind of latest news while you guys are getting your questions in the chat. Don't forget, put a Q at the beginning of them. It makes it easier for me to pick those out from the chat box in and amongst all the other stuff. But just a quick roundup of the latest sort of news. Hector Bellerin is somebody that Arsenal are looking to move on. We already knew that, but we now understand that Arsenal have informed Atletico Madrid of their asking price for the player, which is said to be £20 million. How close to that we will get for Bellerin, I don't know, but it is clear that Bellerin wants to leave the club, and it's also clear that Arsenal want to move him on. Granit Xhaka is still the subject of strong interest from Roma, and of course, Roma have apparently tabled an offer of £12.9 million, 15 million euros. An offer that Arsenal have rejected, by the way, but they're starting very, very low. They're going to have to come a long way for it to be good value for Granit Xhaka. And this is the big problem here. How much is it going to cost for Arsenal to replace him? And are we going to be able to do that? I've said it time and time again. Whenever I talk about Granit Xhaka, I've always said there are better players out there than Granit Xhaka. But what's it going to cost to replace Granit Xhaka? What's it going to cost to replace him, let alone upgrade him? So if you're going to sell him for 12, 13 million pounds, it's just not bloody good enough. Not good enough at all. I'd rather keep him, especially if the club don't have the money to go and make that upgrade or to go and find that replacement. This is the problem. Kunte Okonji says, so are we putting all the blame on the Kroenkes and turning a blind eye on Arteta? Who said that? Nobody said that. Nobody's turning a blind eye on the mistakes that Mikel Arteta's made. But my gripes with Mikel Arteta have largely been tactical, have largely been about game management and personal management, the management of certain individuals. Not because of the transfer funds. That's not his remit. He doesn't have control over what Arsenal can and can't spend. He's told what he can and can't spend. So it'd be unfair to blame him for that. Let's see what else we've got here. Gooner for Life says, why are we the only fans who talk about transfers like accountants? Because we're the only club who have owned. Well, no, we're not the only ones that have owners that are a little bit tight and unwilling to back the club. But I don't know, man. I always get conscious of kind of labeling our fans as one thing and looking at others and saying, well, these lot don't do that. Because I don't watch podcasts or listen to stuff with relation to other clubs anywhere near as often as I do with Arsenal. So it's an unfair judgment for me to make. I've got to be honest. Right, let's pick up some of your questions. Zero says, the problem I have with Arsenal's transfer policy is that they had 6 months to plan for it, and it doesn't look like there is a direction to their transfers. As I said on a recent show, though, mate, you can sit and you can plan a transfer window out on paper, but whether you're actually going to be able to execute what you've identified and execute the plan that you've drawn out is a completely different matter, because as I keep saying, we're relying on selling players. And unfortunately, the offers that we've had, or that we've rumored to have, or that we're hearing about for some of the players that we saw as potential money makers, people that would raise significant funds for us then to go on and do our business, are way below what most people expected them to be. And I think that I think a lot of people have miscalculated. A lot of people have undervalued or underestimated the damage that the pandemic has done. A lot of people have kind of been a little bit ignorant to the fact that it's very different in other countries, that it's worse in other countries, that the Serie A clubs, the La Liga clubs, the Bundesliga clubs, whereby they are, as I said earlier on, more reliant upon the match day revenue, because their TV deals, yes, they're significant, but they're not astronomical like the Premier League ones. That's big, you know, and I think it's very easy to plan a good window on paper. You know, we did a show maybe a week and a half ago, as I mentioned before, where I listed all the players that I thought Arsenal might be willing to sell this summer and put prices next to them. And I was told that I undervalued them. I thought that my valuations were realistic, and I think we're going to see over the course of the window that they probably will be realistic. And I'm not blowing smoke up my own arse or blowing my own trumpet here, but I do think that in the eyes of a lot of people, Arsenal stood to make a lot more money this summer than they're actually going to. And that's going to be a big problem. What else have we got here? Let's pick out a few more questions. Just a quick reminder, by the way, if you haven't done so already, smash that like button. Let me just quickly check where we are at. We've got over 200 of you watching us right now. And as I always say, likes are very, very important. So please do hit the like button if you haven't done so already. Just 49 likes. There's over 200 of you watching, so we should at least be able to get to 100 likes. Come on, just hit the button. It really, really helps. What else have we got here? And I can see a few people having a go at each other in the chat. Guys, just cut that out. There's no need. We're all here. We're all Arsenal fans. We all want the same thing. We have different opinions, but there's no need to get onto each other's cases because you disagree with one another. Said Abdullah says, do you see Arsenal signing a new striker? And are you with that, or do you see other priorities? I think Arsenal have other priorities. I said I'd have liked to see a striker come in if we were to allow one of our current ones to leave. But I think when you look at the goal returns from Alexander Lacazette and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and I know Aubameyang had a disappointing season overall, but when you look at the fact that Lacazette scored a fair amount of goals, and Aubameyang did too, I think we got 15 goals across the season, which was by no means disastrous. I think, you know, it's an area we could improve in, but I think it's kind of the least of our worries at the moment. The midfield and the fullback positions for me are the big priorities this summer. So I'd probably pass on a striker unless we were going to sell one of those guys. Majin says, do you think we'll get Bissouma? Can't rule it out, but not now. As I've said, I think Arsenal's kind of need at the moment to do deals that are involving structured payments limits who will do business with us, limits who will listen to us, limits who will be happy to come and sit around the negotiation table with us. And I think with someone like Yves Bissouma, whose stock is incredibly high right now, you know, the whole Premier League is talking about him. Liverpool have been linked, Manchester United have been linked. So the fact that Yves Bissouma's stock so high will make Brighton feel that they can demand the money up front, and they can demand big money up front, even at a time like this. So if we are going to get Bissouma, it's dependent, I think, it's contingent on him still being with Brighton, maybe after the European Championships and Arsenal having done some sales to be able to raise that money to go and do it. But we've been told repeatedly, haven't we, by the likes of Fabrizio Romano, that whilst he is on the list, he is not the club's priority midfielder. And I keep saying that it's a profile thing. And it's probably why Ruben Neves is probably higher up on the list. But again, we're going to have to see if that deal can get done either. Eddie Longbridge says, is it possible that KFC have already invested for this summer, but it's just not become public knowledge? I would say be excited. It's not impossible. but it's unlikely. If that was the case, they would have done that last year, and then they didn't. We had to wait till the last day of the transfer window to activate Thomas Partey's clause because we were desperate. So, looking ahead and foresight is not really their speciality. So it's not impossible, Eddie, but I'd be very, very surprised. Jasmeet Singh says, Harry, would you take Trippier as somebody who could operate for us on the right-hand side? I wouldn't mind us giving Bellerin and then some for Trippier. I think Trippier's probably at a higher level right now than Bellerin. Trippier's got a wonderful delivery as well, really effective from set pieces. 30 years old, Kieran Trippier. I wouldn't be dead against it, but it's not. I feel like with Arsenal right now, we kind of need to be building for the future and looking at moving forward. And Kieran Trippier doesn't really represent that for me. This is a great point from Matt. He says, whether you think Arteta is the right man for the job or not is irrelevant at this point. He's going to be here next season. We need to accept that. Completely agree. Mikel Arteta will be the Arsenal manager next for at least the start of next season. And now our focus should be on those above him and the need for them to back him and the need for them to support him and aid him in doing the job to the best of his ability. For him to do the job to the best of his ability, he needs better players. He needs players specific to the positions that he wants. He needs players that improve the squad, and he needs players that will tactically fit into what he's trying to do. So the Arteta thing is done for me. We were all sort of wondering after that really bad run we had in the lead up to Christmas. I think after that, he went a long way in kind of convincing people that actually he could get something out of this team and that performances were going to improve. The league form wasn't ever brilliant. It was good. It was better. We had a decent last sort of 10 games to the season. And then the Europa League thing was the big kind of, the point that turned a lot of people off of Mikel Arteta again. The nature of the defeat to Villarreal and the fact that we missed out on a potential route back into the Champions League. But yes, I was upset after the Villarreal thing. And I've gone from really 100% backing Mikel Arteta to being in a place where I'm backing him because he is the manager, but I'm not completely convinced anymore. And I think that's fair based on what we saw over the course of last season. But as Matt says, Mikel Arteta will be in charge at the start of next season. So focus your energy, focus your anger, your frustrations at the people above Mikel Arteta now who need to back him. Because if they don't, then Mikel Arteta doesn't stand a chance. Bradley Costello says, why hasn't the pandemic affected Aston Villa then? Bradley, have a look up Aston Villa's owners. That's all. Have a look at Aston Villa's owners. Incredibly wealthy and willing to put money in. That's the difference. People often overlook how wealthy Aston Villa are as a football club and the fact that their owners are very proactive in comparison to ours. Let's see what else we've got here. Let me pick up. I think I'm going to take one or two more questions. Michael Grayson says, should we be trying to win this year or building to win? That determines your transfer targets, in my opinion. Well, this is why managing a club like Arsenal is incredibly difficult and incredibly complex, because you're expected to win whilst you're building, or you're expected to maintain a standard whilst you're building. And that standard for Arsenal Football Club has to be Champions League qualification. I think we're all realistic enough to say that we don't expect Arsenal to go out and win the Premier League next year or the year after that, or maybe even the year after that. But what we want to see is Arsenal maintain that minimum standard at least whilst trying to build to get there. And right now, we don't look like we're building, and we don't look like, and we're definitely not achieving those minimum standards. And that's why people are frustrated. So I think there's got to be a bit of balance in that, Michael. I think you've got to be able to balance building and achieving your minimum targets. And Arsenal, unfortunately, over the last couple of years, haven't done any of that. Which is why, in my opinion, it's all been so disappointing. Omar says, does the Buendia debacle show full-on Edu's incompetence in his job? No, it doesn't. Because, again, when it comes to Edu is the guy who will have been involved in helping identify the player, and then maybe in the negotiations, that Richard Garlick is involved in that now as well. But again, ultimately, Edu can only work with the club's finances. And if the club's finances meant that the club were only able to do the deal in the way that we're led to believe they tried to, which was with installments, then Edu's hands are tied. I'm sure Edu would love more than anybody to go and flash his checkbook and say, here we go, there it is, done deal, let's do it. But he is a slave to the financial situation of the club. And there's only one group of people responsible for that. And they're sitting over in the States. They don't give a shit about our football club, not at all. And that is KSE. They are sitting there holding all the cards, because sometimes, you could take over a business, you could buy a business. Your business will inevitably have difficult times. Most businesses do. Unless you're willing to make that investment to get your business back to where it needs to be, then you can't be surprised when it's failing. And Arsenal as a business right now is failing, as well as on the pitch, because we're not turning over the profits that we were turning over. Nowhere near it. Yes, the pandemic factors into that, but even prior to the pandemic, we weren't turning over the money that we had been in years gone by. Why? Because the club's gone stale, because the rot is setting in, and Arsenal are falling further and further behind everybody else. And this is a great, Sam says, sounds like we would be in liquidation if Wenger didn't get CL football for 20 odd years. Liquidation, maybe not, but, we would have been in a very difficult financial spot. The banks only gave the loans that they did to the football club with regards to the stadium on the premise that Arsene Wenger signed, because even they, when doing their risk assessments, recognized that this guy was working miracles in getting the team into the top four. Granted, at the time, it was probably a little bit easier because now you've got Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, who are all financially more powerful than us. Spurs have closed the gap on us. Liverpool are back to, being one of the best sides in the country, which they weren't for a long time. So yes, it's a harder task now, but Arsene Wenger still deserves immense credit for that, and he will never get credit for that because he was a victim of his own high standards. He set the bar so high, winning titles, winning cups, going to Champions League finals, going seasons unbeaten, that it got to the point where nobody was ever going to ever accept anything less. Inter says Wenger's half the reason we're in this mess now. No, he's not. He's a little bit of the reason because he bought some bad players. But Wenger is also the reason that Arsenal are as big a football club as they are now and have the global appeal that they do now, because Arsene Wenger took us to that point. So it's very, very harsh to say that Wenger is half of the reason why we're in this mess now. Wenger has a bit of a responsibility because, as I say, in recent seasons, the back end of his tenure, he signed average players for over the top money. But this is not about Arsene Wenger. This is about the Chronicles. The guy was working with his hands behind his back and still achieving those minimum standards I was talking about. And actually what the period post Arsene Wenger has shown us is that actually, we're not any better off, are we? We've had 2 8th place finishes since Arsene Wenger left. 2. An 8th place and what, a 5th? How is that any better than where we were before? It isn't. So there you go. Right. I am going to leave it there. Big thank you to everybody who has tuned in live. Just a quick reminder. Main story is that Hector Bellerin's asking price has been set, allegedly anyway, by Arsenal Football Club. And that is supposed to be £20 million. Atletico Madrid hold an interest in Bellerin. But of course, as I say, it feels like that is very contingent on whether or not they do move Kieran Trippier on this summer, who's of course being linked with a move back to the Premier League. Granit Xhaka's or the bid for Granit Xhaka or the verbal offer, I don't know in what exact what exact form that bid came in or how it came in, but we understand that Arsenal have turned down a €15 million offer from Roma for Granit Xhaka, And that is just simply not enough when you consider, as I keep saying, what it would cost to replace him. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button. Let's get up to 150 likes by the time the outro plays. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. It really, really helps as well. And we'd love to have you on board throughout the course of the transfer window. And a quick reminder that our Euro 2020 coverage begins this Thursday morning. Come and join me 8 a.m. live for a cup of coffee and a look ahead to the European Championships, which kick off on Friday. So we're still going to be bringing you all the Arsenal content that we do currently, but we're also going to be adding in another show looking at the Euros, which I'm really, really excited about. It's something different. It gives you a chance to kind of turn away from Arsenal a little bit and enjoy some stress-free football. So really looking forward to that, and hopefully the weather stays as nice as it is today. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. We'll be back very, very soon with more. Until next time, ciao.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry